Right now, in this very moment, you are holding on to something that was never yours to carry. The illusion of control, the belief that you have to manage everything, fix everything, and make life go exactly according to plan, or else it all falls apart. And you're not alone. We've all been taught this, conditioned to believe that effort equals safety, that control equals success, that surrender is weakness. But pause with me, just for a moment. Ask yourself, who is the you trying so hard to hold it all together? Where is that controller located? Is it your mind, your name, the voice in your head? Or is it just a habit, a pattern, a story? Because if you look closely, you'll see something quietly miraculous. Your heart is beating right now without your permission. Your breath flows in and out without asking. Thoughts appear, emotions rise, the sun comes up, the tides move, entire galaxies turn, and none of that requires your input. Life is happening with or without your control, and in that realization, something softens, something shifts. Because the part of you that's been working so hard to make it all work was never truly in charge. It just believed it was. That's the ego's game. Create the illusion of control and then panic when things don't go according to its imagined script. But you are not the ego. You are the space it moves in. And once you see that, the whole game changes. Surrender is not failure. Surrender is not giving up. Surrender is coming home to what was always true, that life doesn't need your control. It needs your presence. And when you stop trying to direct every scene, when you step out of the way, life flows more beautifully than your mind could ever plan. This is the paradox most people never realize. When you finally stop controlling, everything begins to align. Without force, without stress, without the constant inner war. This isn't about being passive, it's about being free. You'll still take action, you'll still make choices, but they won't come from anxiety. They'll arise naturally, just like everything else in nature, without resistance, without attachment, without fear. Because when you're no longer at war with what is, you're at peace with what comes. So the question isn't, how do I fix my life? The real question is, what happens if I let go? What happens if you stop trying to think your way through everything? What happens if you release the need to control how others see you? What comes next, or where this is all going? What if you trusted life, truly, deeply trusted it? This doesn't mean you abandon your responsibilities. It means you stop believing that you are the one holding the sky in place. You never were. You may ask, but if I let go, won't things fall apart? Let me ask you this. Have they ever truly been under your control? Did you plan every step that brought you to this moment? Did you choose your thoughts before they appeared? Did you decide what emotions would rise, or how the world would unfold around you? Or did it all just happen? See, the mind hates this truth. It resists it because it wants to feel in charge. But deep down, there's something in you that knows that life moves best when it moves through you, not from you. When you stop struggling against the current, you begin to float. And in that floating, something miraculous happens. You relax, your shoulders drop, your breath softens, and you realize things are still happening. You're still breathing. Decisions are still being made. Life is still moving forward. Only now it's not coming from stress or survival. It's coming from clarity, from peace, from inner stillness. That's what surrender really is. It's not passive. It's intelligent allowing. It's showing up for life without needing to bend it into shape. It's walking with life, not against it. But here's the thing. Most people will never experience this because they're trapped in the belief that peace comes after everything is fixed, after the money arrives, after the body looks a certain way, after they feel worthy enough. But the chase never ends because control is a bottomless pit. No matter how much you fix, there's always more to manage, more to obsess over, more to resist. So let me tell you what no one else will. Peace is not the result of control. Peace is the result of surrender. It doesn't happen after you organize your life perfectly. It happens the moment you let go of needing to. If this gave you even a moment of peace or clarity, consider subscribing. Not as a commitment to me, but as a quiet promise to yourself. A way to stay close to the reminders that bring you back to who you really are. Let's make it real. Imagine watching a movie. It's got drama, emotion, surprises. Maybe it even brings you to tears. But deep down, you know, it's just a movie. You're the viewer, not the character. You don't need to change the script or control the scenes. You watch, you feel, you experience, but you remain untouched. Life is no different. The moment you realize you're not the character, but the awareness watching it all unfold, the suffering ends. This is surrender. This is freedom. And this is where life begins to feel like something more than struggle. Because when you're not caught in resistance, you're free to respond. Not from fear, not from urgency, but from the flow of life itself. This is not about doing nothing. It's about doing the right thing at the right time, without stress, without grasping. It's about moving from presence, not pressure. And when you do that, when you truly align with this kind of inner stillness, life starts to mirror it back. Decisions feel clearer. Conversations become easier. You stop trying to force the moment into what your mind thinks it should be, and instead, you meet it as it is. That's the power of surrender. You're not escaping life. You're finally beginning to live it. So let me ask you something. When was the last time you felt peace without needing something to change first? Not because the bills were paid, not because someone gave you validation, not because everything was finally figured out, but simply because you stopped fighting. We spend so much of our lives in pursuit, chasing a feeling we think exists on the other side of an achievement. But have you ever noticed? The moment you finally get what you wanted, your mind is already moving to the next thing. The finish line keeps moving, and the tension never ends. Why? Because peace doesn't come from finishing the race. It comes from realizing you never had to run. This is what Neville Goddard meant when he said, "Be still and know that you are." You are not here to chase peace. You are here to remember it, to rest in the quiet awareness that exists underneath all the mental noise. And this is the doorway to everything. Because the moment you stop identifying with the one who's trying to control life, you meet the part of you that was never trying in the first place. Still, silent, whole. Dr. Joe Dispenza says, you can't create a new future from the same level of mind that created your past. Think about that. If you keep thinking, reacting, and choosing from the same stressed, fearful, control-seeking state, how could anything new arrive? New reality requires new identity. New identity requires new energy, and new energy begins with presence. Not doing more, not forcing harder, but stepping out of survival, breathing, pausing, trusting. So ask yourself honestly, what version of you have you been operating from? The one trying to hold it all together? The one who feels responsible for everyone and everything? The one who can't rest unless it's all perfect? And what would happen, just for a moment, if you didn't believe those thoughts? If you stopped letting your mind be the narrator of your worth? If you stopped reacting and simply watched? This is the beginning of surrender. Not some mystical concept, not an escape from life, but a return to truth. And the truth is, you were never meant to carry so much. You were never meant to hustle your way into peace. You were never meant to micromanage the universe. Look at nature. Look at the trees, the moon, the breath you're taking right now. None of it is being controlled. It's all happening through intelligence, pure, effortless intelligence. And that same intelligence is moving you. So what if you stopped interrupting it? What if, instead of trying to steer every part of your life, you let life show you the way? Not through signs you chase, but through stillness you allow. That's the shift. Because when you're still, you become receptive. Receptive to what you already know deep down, to the voice beneath the noise, to the energy that always guides, to the calm clarity that was never lost, only buried. You don't need to figure everything out. You don't need to fix yourself before you can trust yourself. You don't even need to quiet your thoughts perfectly. You just need to watch, gently, patiently, without judgment. And here's what happens when you do. The space between your thought begins to expand. The pressure in your chest begins to lift. You stop needing answers because you no longer feel so deeply lost in the questions. That's when truth comes in, not as a shout, but as a whisper you can finally hear. You'll notice moments where clarity just arrives, where peace isn't something you reach for. It's something you fall into, and you'll start to feel the difference between being driven by fear and moved by presence. It's subtle, but it's everything, because you'll begin to realize life has never stopped working. You just weren't listening. You were too busy trying to manage it, force it, predict it, fix it. But underneath that effort, life was waiting for you to return, to soften, to let go, to remember. There's something incredibly powerful about saying, I don't know what comes next, and I'm okay with that. Because in that surrender, your nervous system finally exhales. Your body releases the grip it's been holding, and you begin to open to a life that isn't driven by fear, but by flow. This is not a concept, this is a practice, and it begins now, right here, in this breath. In this moment of awareness. Can you feel that? That's presence. It's not loud. It doesn't beg for attention. It just waits for you to notice it. And once you do, once you touch that stillness, everything that felt heavy begins to dissolve. This is not the absence of life. It's the fullness of it. And you don't have to chase it. You just have to be here for it. That's the secret Neville knew. That's what Dr. Joe teaches. That's what every awakened soul eventually realizes. You don't create from control. You create from coherence, from stillness, from clarity, from alignment. And alignment begins the moment you stop resisting what is. Right now, you don't need a new goal. You don't need to figure out your whole future. You just need to be here. Let the next step come when it comes. Let the clarity rise when it's ready. And trust that what's meant for you has never left. It's just waiting for you to stop chasing what you don't need. So stop, breathe, be still, and notice life is still happening, and you're okay. You see, Neville Goddard didn't just teach that your thoughts create your reality. He taught that your state of being does. He said, you do not attract what you want. You attract what you are. And the version of you that is trying to force life, that version is rooted in lack, in fear, in a subtle belief that something is missing and you must chase it down. But the version of you that trusts, that surrenders, that assumes their desire is already done, that version moves differently. There's no more begging, no more bargaining, no more waiting for permission. You assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled. You breathe from the end. You let the energy of already mine become your home frequency. And then, the most curious thing happens. You no longer need to control, because you've already claimed the outcome in consciousness. You've accepted the unseen as truth. And from there, everything begins to align. Not because you're forcing it, but because life can finally reflect back the truth you're living from. This is where surrender and creation are not opposites, but allies. Letting go doesn't mean you stop desiring. It means you stop needing. The moment you stop needing proof, the universe begins to respond. Not because you finally earned it, but because you stopped resisting it. Trust doesn't come after things work out. It's what allows them to. It's not about forcing outcomes, but aligning with the version of you who already knows it's done. And that version doesn't beg, chase, or fear. It assumes, it receives, it flows. When you choose trust in the absence of evidence, you shift reality, because that's when you're no longer acting from lack. You're creating from knowing, and that knowing changes everything, even before anything around you does. You see, Neville Goddard didn't just teach that your thoughts create your reality. He taught that your state of being does. He said, you do not attract what you want. You attract what you are. And the version of you that is trying to force life, that version is rooted in lack, in fear, in a subtle belief that something is missing and you must chase it down. But the version of you that trusts, that surrenders, that assumes their desire is already done, that version moves differently. There's no more begging, no more bargaining, no more waiting for permission. You assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled. You breathe from the end. You let the energy of already mine become your home frequency. And then, the most curious thing happens. You no longer need to control, because you've already claimed the outcome in consciousness. You've accepted the unseen as truth. And from there, everything begins to align. Not because you're forcing it, but because life can finally reflect back the truth you're living from. This is where surrender and creation are not opposites, but allies. Letting go doesn't mean you stop desiring. It means you stop needing. You release the energy of desperation, and you return to the energy of knowing. There's a deep difference between, I hope this happens, and it's already mine. And you can feel it in your body. Hope carries tension. It lives in the future. It says, not yet. But assumption? Assumption feels soft, present, whole. It lives in the now. You don't say, one day I'll be free. You say, freedom is what I am. You don't beg for abundance. You embody it. You walk like someone who already has it, who already knows it, who doesn't need to explain it to anyone. This is the level where miracles don't look like magic anymore. They just look like alignment, because you're no longer trying to manifest from a place of lack. You're manifesting from a place of truth. And that truth doesn't need to push. It doesn't hustle. It doesn't argue with reality. It simply is. So ask yourself, what state have you been assuming? Not what affirmations you've been saying. Not what vision boards you've built. What identity have you been silently living from? Have you been walking through your days as the person who's waiting, or the person who already knows? Because assumption is not in the words. It's in the posture. It's in the tone of your inner world. It's in the way you breathe when no one's looking. Neville would often say, the world is yourself pushed out, meaning everything you experience is mirroring back the assumptions you hold about who you are, what you're worthy of, and what's possible for you. So if you're stuck in cycles of effort, control, fear, it's not because life is withholding from you. It's because somewhere inside, you are still withholding from yourself, still holding on to the idea that you need to do more to become worthy, still holding on to the illusion that peace must be earned. If you've made it this far, you can't back down now. Something in you is already shifting, and that shift begins to solidify the moment you declare it. So take a second and write this in the comments. I trust the universe completely. Writing it makes it real. It turns intention into energy, and sometimes the smallest act of expression is what seals the transformation. But don't underestimate what happens when you write something down. It moves the thought from your head into your hands, from idea into intention. It becomes something the universe can respond to. Let this be your moment. Quiet, powerful, yours. You release the energy of desperation, and you return to the energy of knowing. There's a deep difference between I hope this happens, and it's already mine, and you can feel it in your body. Hope carries tension. It lives in the future. It says, not yet. But assumption feels soft, present, whole. It lives in the now. You don't say, one day I'll be free. You say, freedom is what I am. You don't beg for abundance. You embody it. You walk like someone who already has it, who already knows it, who doesn't need to explain it to anyone. This is the level where miracles don't look like magic anymore. They just look like alignment, because you're no longer trying to manifest from a place of lack. You're manifesting from a place of truth. And that truth doesn't need to push. It doesn't hustle. It doesn't argue with reality. It simply is. So ask yourself, what state have you been assuming? Not what affirmations you've been saying, not what vision boards you've built. What identity have you been silently living from? Have you been walking through your days as the person who's waiting, or the person who already knows? Because assumption is not in the words. It's in the posture. It's in the tone of your inner world. It's in the way you breathe when no one's looking. Neville would often say, the world is yourself pushed out, meaning everything you experience is mirroring back the assumptions you hold about who you are, what you're worthy of, and what's possible for you. So if you're stuck in cycles of effort, control, fear, it's not because life is withholding from you. It's because somewhere inside you are still withholding from yourself, still holding on to the idea that you need to do more to become worthy, still holding on to the illusion that peace must be earned. Real trust doesn't come with conditions. It doesn't say, I'll let go once I know how this turns out. It says, I'll let go now, because I believe something bigger than me is holding the outcome. This is what changes everything. Because when you start trusting life, life starts trusting you. You stop attracting chaos born from fear, and you start noticing synchronicities born from surrender. Suddenly the right people show up, the right words land in your ears. The next step feels obvious, not because you forced it, but because you became a match for the version of you who already has what you asked for. This is not about passively sitting back and waiting. It's about participating in the unfolding, not trying to rewrite the script. The universe speaks in momentum. When you say, I trust you, it says, then watch what I can do. But the question is, do you trust it enough to let go of your plan? Do you trust it enough to stop chasing and start aligning? Do you trust it enough to sit in silence and let the next step reveal itself, instead of trying to control every outcome? Because here's what's real. When you try to do everything on your own, you block the support that's already on its way. You send a signal that says, I don't believe I'm supported, and life listens to that. But when you trust, even when it's uncertain, even when it's quiet, you open a space. You create a vacuum. You make room for miracles. This is the moment you stop trying to move the pieces yourself, and instead, you align with the one who already sees the whole board. You don't have to know how. You don't have to earn it. You don't have to explain why you're ready. Most people think surrender only applies to the outside world, to situations, to outcomes, to letting life unfold. But what about what's happening inside you? What about the fear that creeps in quietly? The grief that lingers longer than you expected? The anxiety that shows up at the worst times, even when everything seems fine? Here's something no one tells you. You don't have to control any of it. Your emotions are not a problem to be solved. They are messengers, movements, waves of energy that rise, peak, and pass if you let them. But what happens? The mind tries to manage even this. You feel sad, and it says, fix this. You feel fear, and it says, push through. You feel anger, and it says, you shouldn't be feeling that. And just like that, you're no longer feeling, you're resisting, you're judging, you're fighting with your own aliveness. But surrender doesn't just mean letting go of life's outcomes. It means letting go of your need to control how you feel. It means allowing every part of you to exist without shame, letting the sadness come like rain, and trusting that it's watering something unseen, letting the fear speak without silencing it, and hearing what it has to say before it passes, letting the joy rise without wondering how long it will last. This is emotional freedom. It's not about never feeling discomfort. It's about no longer seeing discomfort as the enemy. Neville Goddard reminded us again and again, assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled. But that doesn't mean plastering over pain with fake positivity. It means learning to feel fully, to embody what you desire, not just on the good days, but especially when it's hard. If you want peace, then meet your chaos with presence. If you want abundance, then sit with your fears of lack without running. This is how you become the version of you who's already free, not by forcing peace, but by making room for everything that isn't peace without identifying with it, because you are not your fear. You are not your sadness. You are not your overthinking, your story, or your past. You are the space they're all happening in. And when you stop trying to manage your emotions like a project, you start to feel what's beneath them. A deep, unshakable stillness. The kind of peace that doesn't come and go with your mood. The kind that was always there, waiting for you to notice it. This is how the mind loses its grip. Not when you silence it, but when you stop obeying it. When you feel something uncomfortable and you don't flinch. When you feel something powerful and you don't cling. When every wave is welcome and nothing defines you. And here's the wild part. When you let emotions pass through without resistance, they pass quickly. They don't get stored. They don't get recycled in your nervous system. They move. They clear. They heal. That's the paradox. The less you fight your emotions, the more peace you feel. Because what hurts most isn't the emotion. It's your resistance to it. Dr. Joe Dispenza talks about this constantly. He says your body becomes addicted to the chemicals of familiar emotions. So even when your life changes, your body pulls you back into stress, worry, sadness, because that's what it knows. But when you observe it without getting pulled in, without reacting, without judging, you break the cycle, you break the identity, you stop living as the person your emotions created, and you return to the one who's been watching the whole time. That's power, that's freedom, and that is you. Because you are not your fear, you are not your sadness, you are not your overthinking, your story, or your past. You are the space they're all happening in. So now you know. Surrender isn't weakness. It's wisdom. It's not about giving up on life. It's about giving up the illusion that you ever had to control it all to begin with. And when you finally release that weight, you don't disappear. You rise. You become quieter, yes. Softer, maybe. But more powerful than ever. Because you're no longer acting from fear. You're no longer stuck in the cycle of needing, chasing, fixing. You're moving from truth now, from presence, from the awareness that has always been whole. And when you live from that place, life doesn't become perfect, but it becomes clear. You don't get lost in every thought or mood. You don't confuse your worth with your results. You don't try to control the river. You float with it, and it takes you exactly where you need to go. So if nothing else stays with you from this video, let it be this. You're allowed to let go. You're allowed to trust life again. You're allowed to stop managing and start being. Thank you for giving yourself this moment. And if this brought you peace, or even just a little more space to breathe, consider subscribing. Not for me, for you, to stay close to what brings you back to yourself. Thank you for being here. See you in the next one.